I was concluding because the first time the phone died, now the video footage ran out. I love this stuff. Don't you love it when things don't go according to plan? That's my whole point here. I was saying that in medieval mythology, and for those of you who are coming into this through the third video and think, okay, this is already nonsense, I was saying, there's a footnote now. I was saying, look, medieval mythology is the origin of a lot of our scientific ideas. How Sir William of Ockham, who's responsible for Occam's razor and the notion that the simplest explanation is the best one, which is kind of terrifying, like especially like from a Huxleyan angle. Sir William of Ockham said that said said basically that oh sorry, Sir William of Ockham. It's been a long morning. Why should I have to be apologetic for that? Was a medieval philosopher, and chemistry had its origins in alchemy, and so did a lot of our contemporary medicine and science, because that was when the church was most powerful. And if you study Sheldrake or whatever, or Foucault, you know that a lot of our scientific ideas had their origin in the church, and the scientific community still operates in much the same way as the church does. But I could get to that in another video. And I was also talking about if I understand correctly, it was around this time also that we began doing dissections in the West, so I'm not entirely sure. And some of these examples I didn't even bring up in my last video, such as well, whatever it was that I just said, you know, forgetting things is freedom, right? What were the examples I mentioned? I mentioned alchemy, I mentioned chemistry. Well, I'll review it in a moment. It doesn't matter at the moment. Anyway, but I was saying that our notions of science have their origin in medieval mythology. And so, if you look to medieval mythology, though, let's look at one conception that they had of health, and that is the production of phlegm in the throat. You could relate this somehow to also to other notions where symptoms of unhealth are still celebrated in our culture. For instance, in drinking, ingesting poison that makes you vomit, smoking. When people know it's unhealthy, because that's what they're told, they still do it. And you know, we think that things which lead to a lot of phlegm buildup are just symptomatic of an infection. You know, that's lent a very negative connotation. But consider the psychosomatic theory of medieval alchemy. In the Alchemical Wedding, which I've never read, but I've read books influenced by it, which I'll get to in a moment, the notion is that when you're producing phlegm, your seventh chakra, which is more or less a ubiquitous religious symbol across different cultures, is connected somehow with its direct opposite. The principle of transcendence is connected with something earthly. And this is symptomized by a phlegmatic temperament and the production of phlegm. And this is used to represent the mersion of spirit with flesh, and a kind of mystical marriage that happens within one organism, but is also symptomatic that you're ready for marriage in real life, so as below so above, as the spiritualists say, as above so below, because now you are well integrated. You know how to relate with your partner on a physical level as well as a spiritual level, and you don't separate the two anymore. And this was popularized in recent times, first of all, over 50 years ago, or about 50 years ago, by J.D. Salinger's stories about the Glass family and Muriel Fetter's marriage to Seymour Glass, even though he took a cynical attitude towards it. It was also popularized by Harry Potter and Fleur Delacour's sacred marriage to Bill Weasley, who's like literally the same mythological figure as Seymour Glass. Like literally, you could look it up. Like their families have the exact same number of children and everything, and it's a large family, twins and everything like that. And and her nickname is Phlegm, right? This just goes to show that in earlier stages in history, these things which are considered symptoms of unhealth now, according to our notions of what is utilitarian value in a society and survival, that wasn't necessarily the case. And of course, you might say this is subversive to science. These things were subversive at the time to the church. Oh yeah, that's what I was saying also, like about medieval mythology and how it relates. The church, scientific community operates in much the same way as the church power structure, and so a lot of our science actually develops out of medieval thinking when the church is most powerful, and still has that in common with it. For instance, if you read Foucault, you know that his notion is that in medieval times there wasn't a distinction made between how language works and how the world works. It's more or less the same. And so it is in science, as Huxley pointed out, the definition of scientific language is every word has one meaning. And the word refers directly to the world. There's no deconstruction there, or this notion that symbols refer really just to themselves, or that the world doesn't operate according to grammatical laws or anything. No. And, I'm not excluding the Terence McKenna theory that, the world is made of language and grammar, but, that's a very far out there idea. Probably not the same thing as conventional scientism and positivism. That's another thing. These things are typically American attitudes usually. And while people practice science in other countries, it's usually, I think, through the influence of Americanization. I suspect that people adopt this, and then it becomes circular. We think, oh, this is something that is ubiquitous throughout the world. Well, yes, because it's a trend. But I have phlegm at the moment, and this is like really what inspired me. And again, this works on multiple levels. It inspired me, and it inspired me because it was so significant. Yeah, it's significant because it inspired me. It inspired me because it was significant. There is a revelatory experience in sickness when you go through it, when you realize what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. To be exposed to these things, to have your mind altered, to be removed, for some time rendered incapable of performing ordinary societal functions, maybe to predispose yourself to delusions and to hallucinations and all these things. This is a very important visionary state. You can learn a lot about yourself through that, spiritually, even secularly. You can have a secular spirituality as well. But why presume that this is a bad thing? This is what people do drugs for. They're really interested in visionary states that have been forgotten. They're interested in entering into this alternate state of perception. This is why J.D. Salinger practiced Christian Science. He believed, look, Western science is aimed at eliminating these things. Christian Science is aimed at understanding these things and why God wants you to get sick. But the thing is, even at this moment, I can feel it. I can feel a change of perception in me. We might say weed is bad. Well, we love our stimulants, we love our alcohol, because alcohol makes us more social, and stimulants help us get our work done. What about weed? Oh, we hate weed, because we hate herb, we hate cannabis, we hate marijuana, or whatever names you give to it, because people keep trying, needing to come up with new names for it to hide it. We hate that because it makes us lazy, it makes us, and admittedly that can be a problem sometimes, but it predisposes us to visions, but it also makes us placid. It makes us polite at times. It's just it's calming, usually, not always, but sometimes. If you're a naturally angry person, it does bring that stuff to the surface, but it helps you to work through it as well, by changing your style of perception. And the thing about all of this is, this is great, and this is how a sickness might work. It might be painful to you, but if you don't repress it, it's like Watts said, if you repress the fever, you're liable to kill the patient. It's a symptom of health, in his view. If you don't repress it, you might wake up one morning and realize, that was not just a physical thing that was happening to me, that was a spiritual thing. This had to happen. Because now that I'm calm, now that I've been confined to the bed, I've had time to think about things. And since my mind's in a different state of mind, I'm thinking about them in a new way. Maybe I can reconcile things with my lover now, or maybe it's not a coincidence that this happened within moments of seeing her again, or after she's already rejected my last advance. Maybe that was psychosomatic too. Maybe that was God or my body giving me a second chance, because maybe I hadn't done anything wrong the first time, but maybe there was something wrong the first time, and as a result of being rejected that time, I began to suffer, I began to be depressed, and I became sick. But now have the second chance. I've had this window of opportunity between opportunities to grow as a person, and the sickness was a part of that. The sickness was a chance for me to slow down, and now I feel so much more passive and ready for this encounter. And is it therefore any coincidence that my body's producing phlegm, which is supposed to be symptomatic of being ready for something like marriage, of being more grounded than I was before? It's not to say that before I was necessarily in the wrong, like I'd done something wrong, but maybe that just wasn't the time yet. Maybe I wasn't ready yet, or maybe a mistake was made on the other's part, but I have to adapt to that, and ultimately, this seemingly bad thing might actually be working in my favor. Like the Taoist story about the farmer and his son. You know, the farmer, the farmer one day loses his horse, and all the people of the village, the herd, say, you know, this is terrible. And he says, perhaps, perhaps. And the next day, the horse comes back, accompanied by two wild horses, and the people of the village say, this is wonderful. And he says, perhaps, perhaps. Um, Next day, his son breaks his leg because he's trying to train one of the horses, and the people say, this is terrible. And the farmer says, perhaps, perhaps. But the following day, when the conscription officers come by for a surprise visit and they don't take the son because of his broken leg, people say it's wonderful. And the farmer still says, perhaps, perhaps, because, as Watts pointed out, you have to have humility. You don't know what health is. And if you want to be humane, you have to be humble. You have to treat people not by imposing upon them. Our Western prejudice is what health is, recognizing that these are relative. And if your view of health means as an end, it has to involve the means of potentially harming people, people's down to their very souls, by forcing them to conform, then that's fucked. That's not health anymore, because those people are still going to get sick, and some of them are going to get brain tumors and whatever, arguably from your medications. And you might always try to convince them that they're wrong, that they're full of it, that they're crazy, because big pharmaceutical companies sell that shit. But, you know, even that argument that you're crazy is itself, again, an assertion of a kind of hegemony. It's, again, immoral. I mean, they know what's up. They know what their existential situation is. They know the facts of their existence and what's true for them, and they should be allowed the choice to choose it, not have it imposed upon them. If you want to see suicide rates go down, for one thing, stop looking at statistics. If you really want to solve the problem of suicide, recognize that survival itself can't be the answer. There has to be meaning to survival. And don't force people to survive. And if someone absolutely needs to commit suicide or feels called to, consider that possibility as well. That's what I would say. It might not be that person's time, or it might be that person's time. You know, it's up to the individual to decide, because the individual is the center of one's own world of experience. And sure, we can generalize, we can universalize as individuals, and that's fine. That's okay. And at times we do have to use force. But in this case, no. In this case, you don't impose your notions of health onto people. Because those people will know that they're unhealthy because of you. That you feel happy because you feel psychologically convinced about your physical health. So you meet the standards of cultural standards of mental health and physical health. But it's not convincing to them. They realize, I've been marginalized. I don't feel physically healthy. And I think it's because of these immunization shots, but no one believes me. Because I don't meet either their standards for physical health or their standards for mental health, and I've been marginalized. You see? And that's their reality. It's not a universal, it's not that they stand in opposition to some universal scientific reality or majority rule. That is their condition. If they say so, because of their personal views, and as Jung said, their religious instinct is very important in asserting that. So if they say so because of their religious views, they're totally justified in refusing that immunization based on religious exemptions. Because they know their own soul.